Welcome to Fear Spiral. It started on a cold, dark November night. Emily was making her way home, driving through those winding, empty back roads you find deep in Virginia, the kind of roads where the trees lean in and blot out the stars. The only sound was the low hum of her engine and the classic rock station she had on to keep her company. Suddenly, the radio started crackling, dissolving the song into a burst of harsh static. Annoyed, she reached out to change the station, but before her fingers could touch the dial, a faint whisper cut through the noise. Emily. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her name. How she quickly turned the volume knob all the way down. But the silence didn't last. The voice came again, clearer this time, seeming to come from all around her, not just the speakers. I can see you. Panic set in. She glanced at the radio display. There was no station number, no caller ID, just a blank screen. Static. And her name echoing in her head. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. Who was this? Was it a prank? A crossed signal? But how did they know her name? Her eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Nothing but the long, dark stretch of road she'd just traveled, swallowed by the night. She pressed her foot on the gas, wanting to put as much distance as possible between her and that voice. The car lurched forward, tires squealing on the cold asphalt. The voice came a third time, no longer a whisper, but a cold, conversational tone, as if someone was sitting right there in the passenger seat next to her. You're going the wrong way, Emily. Her breath hitched. She was on the same route she took every single night. She could drive it with her eyes closed. Up ahead she saw a familiar fork in the road. The left path was her usual way home. The right lead deeper into the woods, towards an old, abandoned quarry. She'd always avoided it. Take the right turn, the voice commanded, a chilling edge to it now. I'm waiting for you. Every instinct screamed at her to go left, to speed home and lock the doors. But an unnatural curiosity, a terrifying pull, was tugging at her. What was waiting for her down that dark path? And more importantly, how could she possibly escape a voice that was already inside her car? Hesitating for just a second, she flicked her turn signal on. The blinking orange light illuminated the ominous sign for the quarry. She took a deep, shuddering breath and turned the wheel to the right, driving into the suffocating darkness, unsure of what she would find. Stay safe out there. The car sputtered, coughed, and then died, just like that. I pulled over to the shoulder, the gravel crunching under the tires. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and a tremor ran through my hands that had nothing to do with the cold. The road was utterly deserted. No streetlights, no other cars. Just an endless ribbon of asphalt disappearing into a thick, swirling fog. My headlights were the only thing in the world, two cones of pale light pushing back against the oppressive gray. It's just the engine, I told myself, my voice sounding small and thin in the sudden silence. Bad spark plug, maybe. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. Not even a click. I fiddled with the radio, hoping for a local station, a voice, anything to break the isolation. Static hissed back at me, a relentless, empty sound. I twisted the dial, searching, and that's when I first heard it. A faint whisper, tangled in the static. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded close. My heart hammered against my ribs. Okay, Emily, calm down, I whispered. It's just interference. Old radio, weird atmospheric conditions. I switched it off, plunging the car into an even deeper silence. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I stared into the rearview mirror, but the fog was so dense it was like looking at a gray wall. The world outside my car had ceased to exist. I decided to try my phone. No signal, of course. A cold dread started to seep into my bones. This wasn't just bad luck. This felt wrong. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to think, trying to make a plan. Wait for another car. In this fog. On this road. It could be hours. Maybe even morning. And then I heard it again. The whisper. Clear as day this time. No static to hide behind. It wasn't from the radio. It was soft, sibilant, and it came from right behind me. From the back seat, my blood turned to ice. I was alone in the car. I had been alone the entire time. My eyes shot open, but I didn't dare turn around. I just stared at my own terrified reflection in the dark screen of my phone, listening to the impossible sound of breathing that wasn't mine. The city lights blurred into long wet streaks on the windshield. Rain pattered a relentless rhythm on the car's roof, a drumbeat for the anxiety thumping in my chest. I just wanted to get home, to lock the door behind me and forget the feeling of being watched that had plagued me all week. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I stopped at a red light, the empty intersection swimming in the downpour. That's when I heard it. A sound so faint, I almost dismissed it as a trick of the rain. A soft, raspy breath. It wasn't my own. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I froze. My gaze flickered to the rearview mirror. Empty. The back seat was a cavern of shadows. Nothing but the worn fabric and the dark shapes of the city outside. But the breathing was still there, closer now. It felt like it was inches from my ear, a chilling caress of sound on the back of my neck. The air in the car grew thick, heavy, and cold. My own breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't scream. The sound was trapped behind a wall of pure terror. In a voice that was barely a tremor, a whisper that felt deafening in the sudden silence. I asked the darkness, "Who's there?" The answer came instantly, a low, familiar rumble that coiled in my gut like a snake. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years, yet it was as clear as if it was spoken yesterday. "You know my name, Emily." A pause, pregnant with a history I had tried so desperately to bury. "I've been calling yours for years." The light turned green, but my car didn't move. I was paralyzed, trapped not just in my car, but in a past that had finally caught up to me. And it was sitting right behind me. Emily ran all the way home, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The old house, her grandmother's house, stood waiting for her, swallowed by the encroaching twilight. It was always silent these days, too silent. But the quiet never felt peaceful. It felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Her grandmother used to tell her stories, huddled under thick quilts on stormy nights. She'd talk about the old country, about whispers and omens. "There's a voice," she'd say, her own voice dropping to a hush. "It calls your name, just once, right before something terrible is about to happen. A warning, maybe, or a curse. But the worst part, my dear, is that it always knows when you've heard it." Emily had dismissed them as just stories, spooky tales to make a child behave. But last week, standing alone in the kitchen, she heard it. "Emily," it had whispered, a dry rustling sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. The next day, the old oak tree in the front yard, the one her grandfather had planted, split in a freak storm. Coincidence, she told herself. Just the wind. But tonight, sitting in the suffocating silence of the living room, the feeling of being watched was unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the ancient house, sounded like a footstep. She clutched her phone. The screen, a dead, black mirror. She'd powered it off an hour ago, hoping to disconnect from the world and its anxieties. Then, from the lifeless device in her hand, the whisper came again. It was clearer this time, colder, slithering directly into her ear. "Emily." It wasn't the wind. It wasn't her imagination, and it wasn't just a story anymore. The phone was off, completely dead, but the voice had found a new way in. And this time, she knew, without a single doubt, that it knew she had heard. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. It was the sound of waiting. If you enjoy stories that send a chill down your spine, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button for more creepy tales. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there. Have you ever had that feeling? That spine-tingling sensation that you're not alone, even when you're the only person in the room? Emily had it all the time. She lived in this old house, full of creaks and groans that seemed to have a life of their own. Most people would have run, but Emily was curious. She was a sound technician. After all, if there was something strange happening, she was determined to capture it. So, one night, armed with her professional-grade recorder, she set it up in the middle of her living room. She hit record and just let it run all night, hoping to catch one of those mysterious bumps in the night. The next morning, she eagerly plugged in her headphones, ready to analyze the waveform. She played it back. Nothing. Just the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of a passing car, and a whole lot of static. She was disappointed, almost ready to give up. She scrubbed through the timeline, listening to hours of, well, nothing. She was just about to delete the file when her finger slipped. The playhead landed exactly at the 2-minute and 17-second mark. Through the hiss of the static, a sound emerged. It was faint, barely there, like a breath on a cold windowpane. A whisper. It was chillingly clear, and it said, "You shouldn't have heard me." Then, absolute silence. The static was gone. The hum of the fridge was gone. Just a dead, empty void on the recording. Emily ripped the headphones off. The air in the room suddenly dropped in temperature, a cold front moving through the space around her. Goosebumps erupted on her arms. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She looked up, her eyes locking onto her own reflection in the large mirror hanging on the opposite wall. She froze, trying to calm her breathing. She took a slow, deliberate step back, and that's when she saw it. In the mirror, her reflection didn't move. Not for a split second. It just stood there, watching her, a fraction of a second behind her own movement, before it finally, slowly, took a step back to the whisper from the recording echoed in her mind, no longer a question of what she heard, but who. The dust motes danced in a single beam of light cutting through the attic's gloom. I was on a mission, hunting for forgotten family heirlooms, when my fingers brushed against the corner of a small, stiff photograph tucked away in my grandmother's old jewelry box. It was black and white, the edges curled with age. The photo itself was blurry, as if taken in a hurry. It showed a young girl, maybe 10 or 11, standing at the edge of a dense, dark wood. Her back was mostly to the camera, but you could tell she was looking into the forest. But she wasn't alone. Just behind her, partially obscured by the shadows of the ancient trees, stood another figure. It was tall, unnervingly thin, and its form was indistinct, almost like a smudge on the lens. The most chilling detail, though, was its head. It was tilted at an angle that felt wrong, unnatural. A shiver traced its way down my spine, cold and sharp. Who was this person? And why did the photo feel so menacing? I had never seen it before, never heard any stories about it. I flipped the photograph over, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. There, scrawled in faded ink, was a single, cryptic sentence. The handwriting was shaky, but I recognized it instantly. It was my grandmother's, the elegant, looping script she used for birthday cards and recipes, but the words themselves were anything but familiar. They read, "She heard the whisper first." A sudden chill, entirely separate from the attic's draft, enveloped me. She was the girl in the photo, a relative I never knew, a childhood friend of my grandmother's. And what whisper? The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history and a sense of dread. The tilted head of the figure in the shadows flashed in my mind. What did it whisper? I looked back at the photograph, at the girl poised on the brink of the woods, and then back at my grandmother's familiar handwriting. For the first time, I felt a thread of fear connecting me to her past, a story I was never meant to find. And I had a terrible feeling that by finding this photo, I might be the next one to hear the whisper. Let's dive right into a tale that will send a shiver down your spine. Imagine this: a whisper, soft as a moth's wing, starts following you. At first it's just a faint sound at the edge of your hearing, easy to dismiss as the wind or your own imagination. But then it grows, becoming a constant companion. For a young woman named Alara, this was her reality. The whisper was there when she drove her car, a sibilant hiss underneath the engine's hum. It was in her room at night, a faint breath in the quiet darkness, making the familiar space feel alien and menacing. It even infiltrated the sanctuary of her dreams, twisting them into confusing, anxious nightmares from which she'd wake up, heart pounding. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford. The silence she once cherished was now a canvas for this relentless, unseen presence. Exhaustion gnawed at her. Her reflection showed a stranger with dark circles under her eyes, her face etched with a fear she couldn't explain. Friends and family noticed the change, their concerned questions just another layer of noise she couldn't handle. How could she explain that a whisper was slowly unraveling her life? It felt absurd, insane. One night, pushed to the absolute edge of her sanity, Alara snapped. The whisper was particularly loud, curling around her like smoke. Standing alone in her living room, trembling with a mixture of terror and frustration, she screamed into the void, her voice raw and desperate. "What do you want from me?" The silence that followed was heavy, absolute. For a moment, she thought she'd finally broken, that the whisper was gone. But then, a new sound emerged. It wasn't the usual hiss. This was a voice, clear and chilling, forming a response that seemed to echo not in the room, but inside her very skull. And for the first time, it answered, "Your voice." Just 2 words, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. A cold dread, far deeper than any fear she had felt before, washed over her. It didn't want her money, her sanity, or her life. It wanted her voice. What did that even mean? As the terrifying implications began to dawn on her, Alara knew one thing for certain. Her nightmare was only just beginning. It sticks with you. One that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up every time you think about it. Well, I've got one for you today, and it's a chilling one. This is the story of Emily. Emily was just like any of us. She loved spending time with her friends, exploring new places, and was always glued to her phone, capturing every moment. One weekend, she decided to explore an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place that locals whispered stories about, a place draped in ivy and shadows. She told her friends she'd be back by nightfall, promising to send them pictures of her adventure. But nightfall came and went. No pictures, no texts, no calls. Her friends started to worry. By the next day, their worry turned to panic. They called her phone over and over, but it went straight to voicemail every single time. They organized a search party, combing the woods around the old house, their calls of Emily echoing through the trees, answered only by silence. Days bled into one another. Hope was starting to fade when they finally decided to check her apartment one last time. The door was unlocked. They stepped inside, calling her name. The apartment was eerily quiet. They found her in her bedroom. She was just sitting on the floor, her back against the bed, staring blankly at the opposite wall. She didn't seem to notice them at all. Her phone was on the floor beside her, still recording. They picked it up, their hands trembling as they hit play. The video was dark, mostly just the sound of her own breathing. And then, a single, repeated phrase, whispered over and over in her own terrified voice. "It knows my name. It knows my name." The recording went on for hours. The same 4 words, a haunting mantra. One of her friends couldn't take the silence anymore and gently called out to her, "Emily." Slowly she turned her head. Her eyes were wide, but they were empty, as if she was looking right through them. Her lips began to move, forming words, but the voice that came out, it wasn't hers. It was deep, raspy, ancient. It was a voice that didn't belong to this world, and it said something that made their blood run cold. They never repeated what they heard, but they all agree on one thing: whatever Emily found in that house, it followed her home, and it wasn't done with her yet. Have you ever accidentally gone live on social media? It's embarrassing, right? But what if it wasn't an accident? What if your phone started a live stream all by itself, in the dead of night? That's exactly what happened to Emily. At precisely 3:03 a.m. her phone began broadcasting. No apps were open, no notifications, just a live feed from her dark bedroom. Thousands of her followers, woken by the notification, tuned in. The screen was almost pitch black, but they could hear something, a faint, rhythmic whisper. As they strained to listen, they realized Emily was speaking. She was whispering names, one by one, names of people watching the stream. Sarah, double quotes, Michael, Jessica, The chat exploded. How did she know who was there? Then, the truly bizarre reports started flooding in. Anyone whose name was whispered by Emily began experiencing strange phenomena. Sarah heard her name whispered again, but this time, it was from the corner of her own room. Michael saw his reflection in the TV screen move, even though he was standing perfectly still. The stream continued, unstoppable. No one could end the broadcast. Emily, sound asleep, was completely unaware of the digital haunting she had unleashed. The next morning, Emily woke up to a firestorm of messages and missed calls. The live stream had mysteriously ended just before sunrise. She watched the replay, her blood running cold. She had no memory of it, no explanation for how it happened or how she knew those names. To this day, the 3:03 a.m. stream remains an unsolved digital mystery. Those who heard their names whispered are forever changed, left to wonder who, or what, was really speaking through Emily that night. What would you do if you heard your name in a stream like that? Have you ever felt like you're being watched, even when you're completely alone? That prickling on the back of your neck, that sudden urge to look over your shoulder. That's how it started for Emily. It was just a feeling at first, a whisper of unease on the edge of her senses. She was a vlogger, always documenting her life, her hikes through the dense, ancient woods behind her house. One afternoon she decided to film a late-night exploration, convinced she could capture the source of her paranoia. The video starts normally enough, the rustle of leaves, the crunch of twigs under her boots, the pale beam of her flashlight cutting through the inky blackness. But then, the sounds change. It's subtle, a branch snaps, but it's too heavy for a small animal. A low hum begins, almost too deep to hear, a vibration you feel more in your chest than in your ears. Emily's breath hitches. She whispers to the camera, her voice tight with fear. "Did you hear that?" She starts to walk faster, her light darting between the trees. The humming grows, and now, it sounds like it's forming a word. A name. Her name. Emily, it rasps, a sound like dry leaves scraping against stone. Panic sets in. She drops the camera and runs. You can hear her frantic footsteps, her ragged sobs, and behind it all, that terrible, poured, distorted voice calling her name, over and over, getting closer. The police later found her phone buried in the woods, still recording. The last thing it captured was her own voice, broken and distant. "If you hear this, don't listen. It knows you now. It knows your name." The video was deleted from official servers hours later, labeled as a hoax. But some say, if you stay up late enough, if you listen closely to the static between songs or the silence in your room, You can still hear her whisper, but this time, she isn't saying her name. She's whispering yours. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe check your locks tonight. Sleep tight. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me out.